is the Chewing the Cud podcast, a podcast for the UK dairy industry, brought to you from the southwest of England and listened to around the world. Hello and welcome to Chewing the Cud podcast. My name's Andrew Jones.
And I'm Sarah Bolt.
How you going, Sarah?
I'm really good, thank you. And you, Andrew?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. How's it? So anything exciting since we last spoke, Sarah?
I'm not sure. The good news is where we've been measuring soil temperatures here at Kingshay, we've now got above our 10 degrees for sort of 4 or 5 days on the trot. So soil temperatures are where they need to be for getting that grass growth and maize in, I guess.
Well, fingers crossed. I say those colder nights seem to have finally gone. I mean, I know there's a couple of people who've already done a bit of silage around that I've seen. As you say, it should be time for the maize to go in, but I mean, really, people have been waiting for moisture, haven't they? We've still not had a huge amount, and as you say, we got some warmer weather coming next week. Might make the growth push on a little bit finally, which is needed, because there's plenty of people still saying they've not got the grass growth.
Yeah.
But I guess when's the next bit of moisture going to come along? There's not a lot in reserve, seemingly, is there?
There doesn't seem to be. We were having that conversation in the office just the other day, actually, and the phrase came up, what is that? Oak before ash,
yes,
in for a splash, and ash before oak, in for a soak. And I think we're perhaps, it's the splash season this year, maybe. From what people are saying, certainly around here, the oak's definitely ahead.
I hadn't looked at that one. I'd forgotten about that one, but that's a good one. But what was it you were saying before we did? Maybe we should stop being so British and stop talking about the weather all the time. And here we are. We're both talking about the weather again.
Being typically British and talking about the weather. What else do Brits talk about, though?
I don't think there is a lot else, is there? Anyway, we should move on, really. So today's podcast is Pursuing Wealth. But I guess the question is, and that's some of today's episode is, what is wealth? How do you define it? Is it purely monetary, or is there more to it than that? So I guess really let's go listen and see what we find out. This podcast has been brought to you today by Chewing the Cud Limited, who offer independent advice for dairy and beef nutrition, cow signals advice and training, along with ROMS mobility scoring. For more details on these and other services available, please visit our website www.chewingthecud.com or email us direct on nutrition@chewingthecud.com. Hello and welcome to Chewing the Cud podcast, a podcast for the UK dairy industry. Farmer, advisor, processor and everyone else, we have topics and episodes that will interest you. We discuss the practical and the technical aspects of different UK dairy industry topics. We aim to make you think about what you're doing and ask yourself, can it be done differently? Listen to us speak with specialists from inside and outside the industry about their area of expertise. Subscribe and listen to episodes for free on your favourite podcast platform, or sign up on our website www.chewingthecud.com for podcast notifications so you never miss an episode, and links to our socials, including our Instagram, Chewing the Cud Podcast. All one word, and remember, no G. Or email us direct on podcast@chewingthecud.com. If you like what we do, please share and leave us a review to show your support. And that's it. Enjoy today's episode. Hello and welcome back, and as we said today, we're going to be talking about pursuing wealth. But the question is, what is wealth? And to discuss that today is our guest, and our guest today is Neil Adams, who is recently retired as the Managing Director of Promar International. So good morning, Neil.
Good morning, Andrew, and good morning to you, Sarah.
Morning.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and congratulations on the success of Chewing the Cud. It's a really good thing that you're doing here.
You're embarrassing me, Neil. Thank you. I'll say it now straight away. I've known Neil for a very long time, probably far too long, on and off, because you used to be my father's consultant, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. I think you were still in short trousers when I first met you. So
certainly at secondary school. So yes. So it's nearly 40 years we've known each other on and off over the years.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun.
That makes me sound old when I say it like that.
And I also know Sarah as well. So I think we've done some work in the past as well.
We have. Yes.
But anyway, Neil, so obviously, as I mentioned, recently retired, but what was your career? How did you get to the point of being basically the managing director of Promar International?
Okay, well, I don't want to bore your listeners for too long. I grew up in Shropshire on a dairy farm, a small dairy farm. I think I do remember the cows being tied by the neck.
Blimey. Yep.
So, and I do remember the churns at the end of the lane. So, I've seen a lot of change. I do remember us trying to make silage for the first time. That was quite interesting. My father used to suck the air out of the silage with a vacuum pump. I don't know too many people that do that nowadays. Family history, and then various jobs, young farmers, went to Harper Adams, worked with a cracking farmer who's doing this kind of New Zealand grazing farming in Lechlade, actually, before everybody else got really excited about it a long time ago. And it was really good experience there. Then I was managing a farm in the Midlands, and I met a consultant on the farm who actually had worked for the Milk Marketing Board. And I didn't know anything about farm consulting. I didn't even know there was such a thing.
Well, this is obviously
consultant.
long before Promar existed, wasn't it? It was...
Promar originated within the Milk Marketing Board as what we called, it started with low-cost production, and then it became farm management services. And I think when I was dealing with your dad, we were called, or Promar at the time was called, MMB, Farm Management Services.
I thought it was under the Genus banner at the time, actually.
Then in Milk Marketing Board deregulation in 1994. Genus was set up. Actually, Genus was set up about a year before deregulation.
Yep.
And all the different entities went different ways. Dairy Crest one way, NMR another way, and Farm Management Services were part of Genus.
I'm just saying, was it MMB Milk Mind? Did you say MMB Milk Mind?
Well, Milk Minder was one of the services,
yeah.
And Milk Minder still exists as a service that's provided by big dairy costing, really.
Yeah.
So back in the day. So that was met this consultant on this farm, and I thought, wow, this seems a lot easier than milking cows, and it actually seems a lot more interesting. I thought, well, this is interesting. How do you get a job like this? And I learned that the Milk Marketing Board would bring in a load of grads every year. So I applied, and surprise, they decided to employ me. So I was then moved to Yeovil, and I trained with a team of consultants. And I worked with a guy called Derek Gardner, who was my manager. And I worked with Derek for probably about 7 or 8 years. So, after my initial training, I was given my patch. So my wife and I got married not long after that. And we moved into, we were near Trowbridge, which is near where I still live. And I was given my patch and my farmers to go and look after. And then obviously I needed to get new farmers, which I did over the years. So I spent about kind of early first 10 or 11 years of my career having a great time doing farm consulting of all manner of things.
And having to deal with my father.
Having to deal with your father and many others like it. Yeah, I mean, I think, it was interesting, actually, because I treated it very much as a technical job initially.
Yeah.
And then I learned the business skills, and I suppose that's why I got very interested in farm management accounts and budgeting and planning and all the rest of it. But I did, after about 3 or 4 years, I actually realised that it really wasn't a consulting job at all. It was more, you needed to be a kind of counsellor and a kind of, a psychologist almost. And to the extent that I actually enrolled, believe it or not, in a college course to actually learn how to do counselling.
Did you?
Which was, I learned some good skills there. Yeah. And I've always done that throughout my career. I've always kind of had this appetite for new knowledge and learning new things, to the extent that about late 90s, I suppose, I embarked on an MBA. So I embarked on an MBA. And then it was about that time as well, around the millennium, that I stopped working for MMB and I went to work for Omsco as their farm advisor, and kind of heading up their kind of farm recruitment and looking after their farm supply. So that was fun because that was growing. That was good to work in a business that was growing so rapidly. And obviously that's a much more mature area now, and there isn't the growth that there was. But at the time, everybody was very, very excited about organic milk. And I really enjoyed that. And I think actually what we've seen over the years is much more of a coming together of kind of organic farming systems and conventional farming systems.
In terms of sustainability and regen and all of those sorts of things, it is a sort of coming together in some ways, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, clover. I mean, who doesn't want to have clover? You know, that's the thing, really.
And I can get paid for it as well.
Well, yeah, there is that side of it as well. And of course, that's how farm policy has changed as well. So,
yes,
definitely.
I know, because someone I deal with, they've sort of looked it up. Was it in the 70s, or I can't remember the figure now, but there was a lot more clover came in, and I'm guessing probably going into Europe, Common Agricultural Policy, drove all of these things, and now suddenly clover's come back into the mix.
Yeah. And aided by, £700 a tonne fertiliser prices that we had in 23.
Undoubtedly, yeah.
So I did that for about 5 or 6 years, and then I went to work. So bear in mind, my history is co-ops. MMB was a co-op. Omsco was a co-op. And there was an organisation set up called EFFP, which was at the time was English Farming and Food Partnerships, but it morphed into European Farming and Food Partnerships, which seems very unfashionable now. So my work there was very much around working with farmer control businesses, developing farmer control businesses. And that was an interesting job. That was based in London. So a bit more consulting experience, bit more variety. So as you can see, I kind of like variety. And then in 2012 or 2013, I finished working for them, and I rang my old boss and said, have you got any jobs going? So I actually went back to Promar, and I was doing project work, really, all sorts of different project work. One of the most fascinating projects I did was to actually spend some time out in Ukraine. And that was really good fun. And it's just so sad to see what's happened. What an amazing country. So much potential. So did some interesting projects there. And then I basically went into management, and then at some point they thought it would be a good idea to put me in charge. So for the last 6 years, I've actually been running the business. And it has constantly evolved. So in the end, we were not only doing a lot more environmental and sustainability work. I think when I went back in 2012 or 13, we had 2 sustainability consultants. When I left, we had 20 sustainability consultants, including a team in Germany. So, we'd expanded there. And we'd also taken on running the Farm Business Survey, which up until we took it on 2 years ago, had been run by universities. But it's still run very kind of independently of the core business, but does allow us to collect and process a lot of data on farm performance, which I guess we might come on to.
But I guess that's what we're here. We're saying pursuing wealth, and I mean initially we're sort of talking, did you say? But then, as we were talking before we started recording this, it's what is wealth? Because for different people, it means different things, doesn't it? Primarily, I guess we're going to talk financial wealth, but it's not just about financial wealth, is it? Wealth can be having quality time with the family or whatever it happens to be. I mean, you've obviously done some work on this. What do you see as the different avenues for wealth?
Well, I guess like many of your listeners here today, I am a bit of an avid podcaster, not in terms of listening. And I can't remember. I think I was traveling somewhere. I used to do a lot of driving. And I listened to, I wish I could remember who it was now, because I don't want to take credit for somebody else's work. But he was talking about there being 8 forms of wealth.
Okay.
And those we always think about wealth in terms of money, and money is important, no doubt, and it does allow us to do lots of things and gives us a lot of comfort.
Gives us more choices in life.
Yeah, but if we just pursue money, we may be forgetting other things that are important to us and may be important to others. So I think he would argue quite categorically, and I think as you get a little bit older, you start to realise this, that probably the most important wealth factor is your health.
Yep.
Being healthy is really important. You can have all the money in the world, but you'd exchange it if you're really poorly for health.
Yep.
So that's really important. And some of us pursue material things. And do we confuse wealth and material things? So sort of financial security might be having a lot of money in the bank. But if you've traded that for material things, now whether that's a flashy car or maybe even a, massive fleet of combines
or tractors or
more land or what, these are kind of material things that you might be pursuing. But obviously there's a conflict. So all of these forms of wealth are in conflict. So adventure, some people, they're not in. I've got a good friend of my son's, he's so smart. He could do absolutely anything. His joy in life is just enjoying the world, and he travels everywhere.
Yep.
He really has probably not got a penny to his name, but he has massive enjoyment.
He's got experience.
Wealth. Exactly.
So it's like linking our passions then with wealth.
Correct. Yeah, but they are all forms of wealth.
But you could argue though he's got to have the financial wealth to be able to travel.
He makes enough money.
Yep.
To be able, the money that he earns is to pursue these passions.
Right.
Okay. That's his.
Yeah, he earns simply to be able to then go and travel or have the experiences in life.
Correct. And for some people, life is an adventure. So even within your pursuit of your farming ambitions, it can be the adventure that motivates you much more than building some massive pot of money.
Yes.
So it's the excitement that stimulates people.
I think in my own example, to me, it's like, if I'm going to milk cows, I might as well milk the best cows I can. So I went out and got into the genetics and did all right with my genetics, because I thought, well, a bad cow will eat just as much as a good cow and ain't going to look as good and ain't going to produce as much. So I might as well go and, invest in those cows. So that I suppose that was my drive.
Motivation. But there might be others that cows isn't the motivation. It might be milk from forage. It might be anything.
Whereas to me, it's, if I'm going to milk cows, I might as well at least milk cows I want to milk in the morning, not be, tits are here and all over the place or whatever it is. I want confirmation being good cows and doing the right thing. Yeah.
So different farmers have different motivations.
Definitely.
And kind of understanding what those and being true to those motivations is quite important, because we've only got, this isn't a dress rehearsal, this is the real thing, and figuring out what you want. And I mean, Andrew, you'll have met many farmers who've had multiple careers, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Just because you don't want to do dairy farming anymore, there's no shame in that. It's pursuing, the thing is being true to yourself and doing, being true to your passions, I think, because that makes life fulfilling. So I think that's really important for people to ask those questions and don't get just stuck on this kind of treadmill. And I think sometimes it's because they're not necessarily trying to please themselves, they're trying to please other people.
Especially family businesses can be complicated.
Exactly. So, and I think for some people, the enjoyment comes from being in, it's one of the privileges, I think, of being a farmer is the fact that you are so connected to nature. There aren't many other occupations. If you're a zookeeper or something, there aren't so many other occupations where you are so connected to nature. And I mean, that is incredibly rewarding for people as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, all right, we all, when it's a bad day and it's raining or whatever else, but when you've got those glorious mornings and you're just so privileged that it's just you and that's it can be a great thing.
And it's not just nature, is it? It's being surrounded by animals as well. There's not many jobs that you can be out there, nature, animals, and actually perhaps even getting away from people.
It is important to recognise these factors, but if we can pivot back round to money
Yeah.
and financial performance, if you like, and financial wealth, that is really important. Because I think there's fundamentally three things that everybody needs to be mindful of, whether you're an employee that's thinking about paying a mortgage or paying your rent and having enough money to live. Well, exactly the same things apply to a farmer. So we need enough cash to survive, not to be getting ourselves in all sorts of scary predicaments, which will cause stress and poor health. To be able to repay loans, either for past investment or for future investments as well. So people need to be cognizant of, when they're no longer working.
Plan for your retirement, basically.
Planning for your retirement. Something that I've been kind of cogitating a little bit over a while and worrying about. And the closer you get to it, the more you worry about it. And the further away from it, the less you think about it, which is kind of quite a paradox, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then we need to have enough money to pay future loans or for future investment. So that's the starting point, and not having clarity over that. So, you make £80,000 profit per year. But your profit requirement is 120,000, which seems like a lot of money, but it could easily be 120,000 because you're trying to repay £500,000 worth of loans, and you've got to save for retirement, and you need some money to live, and so on and so forth. So that's our starting point. That's just bread on the table. That's just enough money to live, and all those important things. And we need to know what that number is. And if you don't know where that number is, you need to go away and kind of think about it, because that then becomes your break even. Number one really is that we need to see the net worth growing. The faster it grows, the better. And I did a little illustration this morning. I'm going to kind of flick through my paperwork just to give you an idea. So, compounding is just the most phenomenally interesting thing for a lot of compounding of your wealth. So the growth of your money, the growth of your investment. So let's say you're a farmer and you're sitting on net assets. Not all of your readers will be sitting on net assets of £1 million, but we're just using a round number.
As a figure,
Some will have more, some I'm sure will have less. And we have a farming career of 40 years. And we grow that million at 5%. Over 40 years. Hazard a guess at how much money you'd have after 40 years.
That's where I'm no good with figures. Don't look at me. Don't look at me, Andrew.
Come on.
There's a reason I don't do figures, and go on, tell us. Tell us.
So 5% over 40 years, and you're worth 7 million. Now, obviously, inflation is going to eat into that. Right? Let's grow our wealth 1% faster than that. Let's grow our wealth at 6%.
Right.
Then how big is the pot after 40 years?
So I'm guessing it's going to be probably at least 8 million.
Well, it's in fact 10 million. Okay. So it's 10 million.
10 million.
So the difference between a 5% and a 6% is £3 million. Okay. So it's nearly 50% more. Okay. Now that 1%, how do I get how does that equate? Well, interestingly, you might have 200 cows. Okay. That might be £1 million of net assets. Maybe not quite that many, but that's just £50 a cow. £50 a cow extra would give you that additional 1%.
Which, when you look at it like that, isn't that much.
It sounds achievable.
Yeah, of course it is. But it's that little attention to detail. It's getting that strategy right and getting the execution right that makes such a difference. So don't think about what you're doing right now or right this year, but think about it over your lifetime. Think about the achievement of success and how much a difference that makes.
And you need to be able to measure that to know that you're making that progress.
You do need to measure it. You do need to know kind of where you are, and that's really, really important. And so I think I'd probably go back to thinking a little bit about where you are now,
Yep.
where you want to get to,
Yep.
and what do you want to avoid. I think that's a really good question.
The biggest thing I'd say with this is you said over 40 years, but let's be honest, how many of us 40 years ago were even thinking about this? Most of us, when let's say we're 20, we're starting our careers, that seems such a long way away and we don't even think about it. It was really, if you're 20, you should be thinking about this kind of stuff now to be as not successful, it's maybe not the word.
Wealthy.
Wealthy, I suppose we're talking about, for when you retire or whenever that happens to be. If we think about it when we're younger, we're more likely to achieve what we want to achieve.
Yeah, and you don't start with £1 million.
No, of course you don't.
When you're 25 or 20, you might have a car.
Yeah.
But it's a mindset issue, really.
Yeah.
This is and you obviously...
But if you leave it later, you've got to pedal harder just to try and make it what you do because you've not got the compounding of the 40 years to do it. You're trying to do it in 10 years or 15 or however it meant to be, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. Clearly, the more you start with, and the better the return, and the longer, the more. But what I really wanted people to focus on here is just those marginal gains that you make, those small differences. That's why I went back to £50 a cow.
Yes.
Those small differences that you roll up over time.
Yeah.
That are and obviously you have to keep going, because you have to achieve that 5%. So people might grow really quickly and then, actually I'm fine now. I'm gonna take my foot off the gas. Well, that's fine. But if you're a pension fund manager, your investors are going to want you to keep going.
So it kind of comes back to is the repeat story seems to be with a lot of the podcasts we've done is people say, well, it's about sustainability. Well, half the time, actually, that's about improved efficiency. And that's effectively what you're saying. To make those extra £50 comes down to potentially improved efficiency of what you're doing, which will then lead you to the improved profitability. And if you've got the improved profitability, you're making those extra £50 a cow, it's going to keep driving you going forward. So it really, because you and I were at the Trow conference, weren't we, earlier in the year, and there was one or two farms saying we're getting fed up of people talking about sustainability. And someone went, well, why don't you call it profitability? And they went, yeah, that floats our boat. Yeah, happy with that. And really, sustainability, efficiency and profitability all tie in together, don't they?
Well, I think the true understanding of sustainability for me has always been a triple bottom line approach, which is people, environment, and money, profit. You can't have one without the other. Essentially.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think everybody knows that. And there's no reason at all why you cannot have them all, if you see what I mean.
Who is it? Wasn't it the recently retired NFU president? Didn't she come up with the phrase? Isn't it? You've got to be in the black to go green. Is that wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's what she said, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, why wouldn't you?
Yes. Well, exactly.
And why would you do it? Why would you try and compromise your overall levels of farm profitability just to create environmental gains?
Yeah.
It has to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
But I mean, fortunately, the way that I think the ELMS system is working is that there is at least some funding to be able to kind of make these trade-offs and improvements. And we're seeing, I know that my colleagues on the ground, a lot of their time
ex-colleagues
on the ground, good friends of mine, who are, that is their role in life is to try and help farmers find their way through this kind of slight malaise, I suspect, of where we were, of what we were doing and what we need to do going forward, really.
And does that take us back to what you were saying about the strategy and actually building that into the strategy as well? And I picked up there about things that you want to avoid. And that's probably one of the areas that I don't always think about either personally or from a business point of view. And I'm really intrigued by that as to bringing that into it as well.
So I've formed a kind of model over the years in my mind of how I would, certainly if I was going to see a farm for the first time and get to know somebody, I think the model in my mind is, first thing I want to know is, is this strategy that they've got likely to succeed? Now, for listeners, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by strategy? So a strategy might be something like, these are the big things, the big decisions. It's your farming system. It's the type of machinery that you have, the amount of land that you're renting, the system of production. Are you block carving? Are you all year round? That's the strategic decision. Am I pursuing yield? Blah, blah, blah. Those are the big strategic decisions.
Yep.
And in my view, you've either got the right strategy or the wrong strategy.
Yep.
Good strategy, bad strategy. And then the other level is, well, I might have the right strategy. I might have decided that my autumn calving maize-fed system is the right system, but I'm not actually executing it very well. Okay? So on the other axis, if you like, we've got good execution and poor execution. So a poor strategy, poorly executed, forget it. Hopefully we haven't got too many of those. But we do see, poor strategies done really well.
Yep.
So I'm doing this really, really well, but I'm not actually getting anywhere.
Can you give us an example of that, just to bring it to life a bit?
Good question.
So I've certainly seen, I've seen both examples, actually. I've seen the kind of low yield, low concentrate, I guess you could call it New Zealand grass-based system.
A low input system.
A low input system, but a low input system which actually wasn't really working, either because of a rental charge, but also not really doing it, not executing that strategy as it is intended, because there's buildings and feeders.
The infrastructure was already there to be used, and yet they were not doing it because they're coming on a tenancy or whatever it happens to be.
So it's almost not maximising the resources they've already got. Is it down to that sort of?
Well, it's not optimising those resources. So I've seen. I'm all for low inputs. Don't get me wrong. Some of them. If you want to know what is the best dairy, for all your dairy farm listeners out here, the best thing is high output, low cost.
Of course.
We have this nonsensical idea that you're either high output, high cost, or low output, low cost, and that there isn't such a thing as a high output, low cost system. But believe it or not, I've seen plenty of them over the years. I've seen people making £1,000 a cow on 10,000 litre systems.
Yeah.
Because they're not over. They've got, and it actually boils down to simplicity. It really boils down to simplicity and really good attention to detail.
And I was going to say that, and those guys probably had very good forage as well.
Absolutely.
That really is the driver for most for usually profitability in that way is good quality forage, and good quality forage certainly makes my life easier, and then you're having to buy less products to balance the ration to achieve those yields you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, it is forage. It's not only forage.
No.
We can get terribly exercised about whether somebody's spending 8 or 10 pence on feed for purchase feed.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a big difference. Or even 12 pence or even 14 pence. These are kind of big differences. But then you peel back, and this is, we'll probably come on to this when we talk about benchmarking.
Yeah.
And you peel it back and you think, well, hang on a minute, we've got another 12p on labour, we've got another 15p on power and machinery. How does this add up?
Yeah.
Interestingly, I had a conversation with a tenanted farmer who wanted to develop the system, and the conversation really just got down to the fact that, I think he'd put about £80,000 of savings to keep the business going.
Yep.
And it was all, it's just the milk price. I just need it. It's nothing. There's nothing I'm doing wrong. It's all the milk price. It's all the milk price. And I said to him, well, what is your break-even milk price? And he had no idea what his break-even milk price was. Yep. What do you need?
Yeah.
And of course, when you've worked it out, well, the break-even milk price on this farm was over 50 pence a litre. Now, we had 50 pence a litre, but
it was never going to stay there.
Inflation at some point will take us to 50 pence a litre. But right where we are now, that's a kind of
let's be honest, how many years did it take us to break 30 pence?
Yeah, exactly.
It had been that 30 pence for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, inflation might take us there, but it takes a long time.
Yeah.
So, to think that actually, this farm will work. There's nothing wrong with my farm.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was massive amounts of labour. It was quite efficient technically, but huge land area. Like the farming intensity was appalling. Right. It was really, really low.
Yep.
So although it appeared to be low cost, it wasn't really, because the farming intensity was so low. So, the stocking rate essentially was just ridiculously low.
Yeah.
So to me, the farm situation there was more a strategy problem than an execution problem.
So you're saying he potentially should have been more intensive on what he was doing?
I do think so, yeah. I do think in that situation, that would have been what I should have done. So you need to know kind of where you are and whether or not you're in the right place, have the right system. So how do you go about finding that out? I think you need to have an open mind. I think slightly frustrating conversation that I had with somebody about maybe 18 months ago, and it was, I really know what I'm doing, and I used it. I mean, hey, I'd like that person to have used us for advice, but that wasn't really the point. I think the point that I'm trying to make here was that, I used this person, but this person was utterly wedded to one way of producing milk.
Yeah, and it
was, but I didn't think. So in a way, this guy wasn't really he might have been getting somewhat unbiased advice, but it wasn't utterly unbiased in the sense that it was kind of very blinkered advice in my view.
He, for argument's sake, he'd gone for a consultant that maybe was a spring carving specialist and gone. I'm not saying that was the case, but gone for a spring carving specialist that had taken them down the route of going spring carving. But what you're saying is you were looking at it going, actually, if you changed your system, given your land, given your buildings to, I don't know, maybe autumn carving or whatever it happened to be, they would have been better off for doing that.
Yeah, and I think, that comes from a lot of experience. But I think the experience comes as well from the fact that I've never really been that wedded to one system of farming.
Yeah.
So I was quite, and I've always got these, I call them exemplars.
Yep.
There's a problem with benchmarking is that when you just do standard benchmarking, you're just comparing to an average.
Yes.
But there's no such thing as an average.
Every farm is different. I mean, I know that with what I do. You can't, I know there are some out there that like to advise a certain way and that's the way you do it. But I deal with spring carvers, I deal with high input, and you've got to work with the farm and know the limitations of the farm. Well, actually, okay, you self-feed and use ring feeders, and I'm just thinking of one client. That's it. We know that they feed a bucket of concentrate a day, and that works out at 3 kilos a cow. So I have to make a blend up that's 3 kilos a cow, and they dig it out, mix it all together on the ground, and then put it in the feeders. It's knowing the farm and knowing what works for the system. There's no point in me going, well, you need a wagon or whatever. Okay, well, that's your system. We'll make it work for your system. And whereas other people, that's the way it's got to be and that's how you do it. And it's not. It's working with your clients and working with them and what works for them.
And is that if you gave one farm to 10 farmers, there'd probably be 11 or 12 different solutions because different motivations come into that
undoubtedly.
And everything else, isn't it? And actually, which one of those is the best strategy for that farm?
There probably is an optimum strategy. There probably is, and there's probably a narrowing of choices.
But it's also comes down.
So in any, simply because of geography, the topography of the farm, the buildings of the farm, the capital that the farmer has available. But there aren't endless permutations for every farmer. There probably are endless permutations, but there are only a number of options that are likely to work.
But it also depends what they want as well, doesn't it? Like we were already saying, they might sacrifice financial yield because the type of cow they want to have. Because that's what gives them satisfaction. Their wealth is, as you say, it's not purely being driven financially. It's being driven by working with good animals or whatever it happens to be.
Well, only to the extent that you have to make sure that you satisfy that golden
Oh, of
rule
course,
first
but
of
you know
all.
what I mean. Yeah, what I
That
mean is
golden rule has to be satisfied
Yes.
of having enough money to live.
But what I'm
to
saying
pay-
is, you might not achieve those. You might not achieve the same level of same peaks that you might have done before.
No, absolutely, and it may be that you can achieve your financial goals and your financial stability for the system that you really, really love.
Yeah.
But if you pursue the system that you really, really love and you really, really want to pursue, but you're unable to meet that first golden rule of having enough cash and being able to repay the loans and live, you are going to end up being very stressed.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah. Undoubtedly. So you mentioned benchmarking a little bit there, Neil.
So I started talking about exemplars.
Oh,
okay?
yes.
So what I said was, if we're going to benchmark, it's not a bad thing to do to go and use those kind of standard averages. So there might be a standard average. I mean, I would say standard average dairy farm might be making in a particular year £400 a cow profit.
Yeah.
Which it's good to know, and it's good to know how my feed compares, how my AI compares, how my vet compares, how my labour.
Well, you want to do a CFP, comparable farm profit on your comparing your farm with others of a similar system, etc., etc.
And that's really important. But I think what I've found over the years that's really, really helpful, and it's not that easy to do, is to find somebody who's doing it brilliantly.
Yep.
And this is what actually Toyota do. So if you look at what Toyota do, these guys, they kind of like invented the whole idea of kind of benchmarking, and they take all their car plants around the world.
Right.
And what they do is they go, okay, which is the best car plant?
Yep.
I know many other companies do this. I'm just using
Toyota
because they were the guys that invented it. Which is the best car plant? Okay, right, this one in Texas, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, right, so the rest of you are going to compare yourself to that one, and you're going to find out what they're
doing.
They'll fly their staff out there, and they'll really grind down into the absolute detail, continuous improvement of getting better. But they're not just getting better they've got a view towards what excellence really looks like. And I think if you can do that, if you can find the exemplar of a autumn calving, maize feeding farm, or a exemplar of a spring calving, New Zealand style farm, if you can find those exemplars, compare yourself to those, then that gives you some indication of where you need to go. I think the other thing that you should do as well, and I'd probably start here if I was benchmarking, as I'd look at your own performance. Where are you today? How are you getting on versus last year and the year before?
You've got to be able to quantify what you're doing, haven't you?
Yeah. Now, in terms of going away to benchmark, it's surprising how much information is out there, but a lot of people don't know where to look for it.
Yep.
Okay, so there's nothing wrong with John Nick's or Farm Management Pocketbook.
There's definitely nothing wrong with John Nick's. Being an XY girl myself, there's absolutely nothing wrong with John Nick's.
I always preferred the ABC book, but there you go.
But you know that they're kept up to date.
Yep.
They basically do rely a lot on Farm Business Survey data. Farm Business Survey itself has its own website. You can type Farm Business Survey into Google and you will find lots and lots of different reports on all sorts of farming systems. So that's a good source. And then clearly you're then into kind of like, okay, well, I might have to go for some paid for advice because, companies like Promar or Kite or whoever it might be, they're not just going to give away their information.
I mean, even another way to benchmark is simply, I'm going to say it, is the King's Hay costings.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Others are available.
Yeah. Although, I do think
that's
I'm
measuring you.
I'm a fan of dairy costings
but they're measuring you on a technical more than a financial, aren't they?
I mean, feed is a third of your costs.
Yeah.
Definitely your milk is nearly 100% of your output. And so it's important to measure output and that. But, there are a lot of farmers who can tell you exactly what their costs are for feed or whatever.
Yeah.
But, total cost of production, labour cost per litre, machinery cost per litre, all those kind of things, what my break even is, that you really need to get into the detail of all of those numbers.
Yep.
And I'm also quite a fan of, there have been, and I've worked with a few over the years, where you can get some openness and transparency against farmers. It's not an easy thing to do because it's confidential and people feel a little bit uneasy.
Well, there are some discussion groups out there I know that do a CFP within the group, and I know those groups have been going so long, they are completely open with their financials. And they definitely bounce off each other and learn, well, hold on, what did you do differently this year that's allowed you to make that difference?
Yeah.
And it's from my background with working with AHDB and a lot of these discussion groups, that it's amazing how farmers really learn from each other. That peer-to-peer learning and actually looking at that alongside those financials is so important.
Yeah. But you've really got to gear yourself up from both a competence perspective. You need to learn, because nobody was born with this ability. Nobody was born, it took me a long time to learn how to do it. Nobody was born with this ability to kind of bring all these numbers together and break them down and divide them out and do all the rest of it. So you can either pay somebody to do it, and that's fine, but you might not understand it, or you learn how to do it. But that's a management skill that's really, really important. So I think that's the first thing, is that you really need to know how to do this job of benchmarking and budgeting and planning.
And as you say, sometimes it's not just about the headline, it's actually being able to delve down and see where the differences are.
Correct. And one of the challenges that you have is that, it's surprising really, where are your financials? What are your financials? Well, we do the VAT and the accountant does the numbers, but probably don't even own it. It's just like, well, this is how much tax you've got to pay.
Yeah.
So not really, this is kind of slightly ludicrous, really. You're running a business, but you don't really have a handle on the numbers. That's a sackable offence from what I've been doing. I have to have my hand, that you're being challenged on that on a constant basis.
But you could say, but that's your job, and how do I put this? Not everybody's into numbers in the same way.
But that's where you bring in the skills. You surround yourself with the skills that you haven't got. I always say, I'm not a numbers person, so I have to surround myself with somebody that is a numbers person. And that's the same for farmers, that if you're not a nutritionist and you're, not really into that, you surround yourself with a really good nutritionist. You're not into your numbers. You surround yourself with somebody that can delve into those numbers for you. And I think that's where perhaps farmers don't always think about surrounding themselves and including those sorts of people within their business really closely and with their business strategy.
Go back to my 5%, 6%, 10 million, 7 million, 10 million.
Yep.
In my experience, you don't have to be a fully fledged accountant. You don't have to be at consultant level of competence for finance, but having a really good head for numbers and understanding what's going on, I think it's worth investing your time. And it may not be you within your team of people, but having those conversations, sitting down every now and again to talk through, to have a plan, I think it's the difference.
Which I'd argue again is probably a good reason for a consultant, because having those discussions within family without a outside adjudicator, might be the right word, aren't always easy.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. And I think if you're maybe a bit more old school. I don't think my dad was a classic kind of traditional farmer. He worked incredibly hard. He knew the cost of everything.
Yep.
Very cost focused. But I guess he kind of could have optimized more what he was doing on his farm.
Yep.
And I think, it's interesting because when I was growing up, there were, farms where they had 70, 80 cows, and they were sending 2 or 3 children to public school. It just seemed easier in those days.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore.
No.
And the difference, the profit margins can be quite narrow, and the numbers are so large, the level of production is so large, you can lose a lot of money as well. So I think you need to be all over it, really. So I think that's a good thing. And then from a management perspective, think about one version of the truth. So what I mean by that is I certainly come across a lot of farms where the whole way the office is run and data is kind of collected and processed is just ludicrous. It's too complicated.
Okay.
It should be one version of the truth. It
Yep.
should be one set of accounts, not
Yep.
3, this book for that, this book for that. And
Yeah.
it's so easy and cheap to do with modern accounting systems.
Yep.
One version of the truth.
Yep.
Key in once. And farmers love the sound of that. They love the idea, I have to keep doing all this stuff, but you are the architect of the system that you have for managing information on your farm.
Yeah.
So sometimes and things grow like weeds, don't they? The systems. So
Yes.
every now and again, just have a stop and think about, well, can we simplify our whole back office or whatever you want to call it?
But I know what you mean in that regard, because I remember you having to enter data for the vets, then repeating the same data for herd recording, or because still it was paper systems we're talking when I was in North Queensland. But things, just as you say, it was like, I'm just doing the same thing again, just in a slightly different way. Whereas now things, you say, if you've got the right system, you can put it in that system and then send it straight to your vets or send it straight to your herd recording, whatever, and it's all done.
Yeah, and I'm sure people are probably throwing things at their radio now, but because it has not been easy. I think in a way, if I look back, the requirements of, I call them downstream stakeholders, have definitely increased.
Yeah. But your supermarkets or whoever they want to be.
Supermarkets,
Red Tractor.
It hasn't. But to me, it's the argument for having one version of the truth.
Yes.
Because providing that information shouldn't be hard.
Yep.
I'm a fan of it being cloud-based, and because you can access it anywhere, but also it's secure. Like if you lose this stuff, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
From an accounting perspective, it should be accrual-based, and what I mean by that is you should be accounting for unpaid bills and if you like, unpaid receipts within your accounting.
Yep.
And being able to kind of differentiate between interest and capital repayment, and to do the job right. And then I think when you've got a simple system, it's really about monitoring what matters. So it's not everything. You don't have, and I think it requires a lot of thought to know what are these KPIs, what are the key things that we need to be focusing on. And I don't think they're the same for every farm.
Yep.
It goes back to strategy, I think. What makes this autumn calving systems, what makes this really successful? I think on a lot of farms, preg rate is always going to, for dairy farms, preg rates are always going to be important. If you don't have pregnant cows, you don't produce much milk. So, that's certainly one of them. It's not a financial measure. No, it's really, really important.
Really, it's probably one of the biggest drivers like you say, we're not going to have milk if we don't have pregnant cows. So really, our job is about getting cows pregnant.
Correct.
And then the rest comes with it.
Yeah. It's a good lead indicator. It's a good, when you look back at a farm that's kind of fallen off a cliff, you think, well, see what happened. You had this big problem where you didn't get cows in calf for 2 months, whatever that might be, fertile bull or whatever.
You need something that actually sets the alarm bells ringing straight off before you do fall off that cliff, isn't it? It's what are you going to measure and monitor that highlights it before it gets too bad that, it's hard to get back from, isn't it?
Yeah. And then have some key financial measures, whether that's labour, machinery or whatever. And you don't need to measure everything in massive detail, but if I can see that my machinery costs or my labour costs or whatever it is are kind of going out of kilter, well then you can then dive into it. It can be quite overwhelming if you've got 30 metrics. So I remember our management systems that we were running within Promar. The first page, if you like, the P&L for the month or the quarter or whatever it was. It wasn't over facing. It wasn't too complicated, but clearly where you were starting to see some variance, well, okay, that's what I need to drill into. That's what I need to look into. So this whole budgeting, planning, benchmarking, it all kind of works together. Don't do any of these kind of things in isolation.
Okay. Okay. I'm sort of, looking at the time a bit, Neil. I mean, any last sort of words of wisdom, any thoughts, anything else we should really be saying to people?
Well, let's just look back at 24. So when we say 2024 financial year end, we're talking about the harvest year of 23, the winter of 23, 24. So we're now into the winter of 24, 25. So that's the current year. And the prior year was obviously 22, 23. So 22, 23 was exceptional. We kind of peaked at 54 pence a litre. Farmers made enormous levels of profit. Probably spent quite a bit, had some pretty big tax bills. And then wallop, it was the absolute other extreme in 23, 24. So on our costed farm sample, we saw profits halve.
Right.
Which wouldn't be a terrible thing if the profits that they'd halved to were a sustainable profit. But for many farmers, they weren't. 20% of farmers made a loss. As a fifth. And about 40% didn't make enough.
And is that, we just talking dairy farmers, or are we talking
dairy? That's our specialist dairy sample.
Right,
So 20 made a loss. And about 40% lost equity. So back to my growing, they weren't growing. They were, if you like, living off assets. So it's 40. So that's,
so what you're saying is 60% effectively stood still or went backwards?
No, 60% stood still or went forwards. 40% went backwards.
No, didn't you say 20% lost and 40%
lost equity? 20% make a loss. They all lost equity. 40% lost equity because they didn't make enough profit.
Right.
You have to make enough profit to live on. Okay. So their living was more than their living cost was more than their profit. So they went backwards. 60% probably stood still or maybe went forwards. So it was a poor year. It was a very tough year. It's good to see where milk prices have been heading over the last
It's creeping
months.
up, isn't it?
Yeah. But bear in mind, we'll have had quite a chunk of the 24, 25 year at those kind of lower prices. But the other thing that really fed into profit reduction in 24, 25 was inflation. So we saw obviously big increase in labour costs, big increase in electricity costs, not so much fuel costs, and finance costs as well, because we went from a situation where interest rates were damn near nothing up to sort of 5%. So again, these kind of things are moving in the right direction, but it was a particularly tough year.
Now, there's one question I thought while you're saying that. You've obviously now retired from your role in Promar. As you say, you've been in the industry a very long time, and you've seen some massive changes, mentioning, still churns, etc., etc. Where do you see the future of farming?
Where do I see the future? Well, I think it's inevitable that people. When I started, I think when my father was farming, there were probably 60,000 dairy farmers. When I started working for the Milk Marketing Board, there were like 35,000 dairy farmers. I don't know, we're under 10 now, aren't we?
That's 7.5,
another 500 went out last year, didn't
we? So I think there's an inevitability that we will see less and less farms producing milk in the UK.
But despite dropping numbers, we don't seem to drop massively the amount of milk, do we?
Because they have more cows and they expand and they grow, and that's productivity, isn't it? I mean, that's how people are increasing productivity by having more cows. And I think we've got a lot going for us. It's very easy to get very kind of doom laden, but what have we got going for us? Well, we live in a land of kind of reasonable laws and stability. We have a lot of chimney pots, a lot of consumers, some of whom are quite well off. Not everybody's well off, but, know, and they need food. We definitely need food. We can't manage without it. We might be able to manage without a new car and a carpet or whatever, but we definitely got to have food. And we've also got a phenomenally good growing environment.
For grass growth, definitely.
I mean, more so than, I think we're certainly seeing more extremes of weather. But nonetheless, we still have a good climate for producing the food that bovines need to eat. So from that perspective, I think it is a positive environment. But I guess it's down to being clear about whether or not you've got a system that can survive. I mean, there's no doubt there's going to be more technology.
Yep.
That's going to be, and that's a trap. As much as that's an opportunity, that's also a trap. There's new shiny things, can be very, very attractive, but they're not necessarily going to drive profits. So you have to be very, very careful. You have to be very, very clear about where you want to go. So I think that there's a very good future for those people who've got the right mindset and the business acumen to be able to weather the storms.
Yep.
So I think we won't be substituting milk any day soon. I really don't think.
No, and it's interesting. Don't know if that's exactly what you're referring to, but there's being less interest in alternatives to milk, aren't there? So there is a driver for milk again.
Well, if it has dipped, it's we have seen marginal shift, haven't we? We've seen, but I think it's more to do with behaviours than people moving to alternatives. So, for example, liquid milk might have dropped, but I don't think it's really because everybody's gone on to oat milk.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is people don't have cornflakes in the morning.
Yeah.
Probably less people are drinking tea than they were before. So I think there's a behavioural change that's kind of going on, but. Yeah, these aren't massive shifts in consumer behaviour.
Yep.
They are shifts in consumer behaviour, and that will continue. But
exactly.
I'm sure people will want
Yeah.
dairy products, definitely.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I know from my own experience overseas, countries that weren't traditionally dairy strong wanted dairy products because they saw the benefits of dairy, and hence why I know myself. We sold animals to, Philippines, China, Mexico, Indonesia, Pakistan, all because they wanted dairy.
Yeah.
They saw the advantages of having dairy in their diets.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Well, I'm sort of thinking it's time really to do it. So, I mean, thank you to Neil. I mean, any words from yourself, Sarah?
It made me stop and think about the retired farmer, that we were perhaps looking at our 40 years and saying that maybe it's a 40-year career in farming. But actually, one of my things is actually thinking about the status of a retired farmer, and perhaps how can we sort of almost up that status so that retirement is something that we can work towards within our visions for our business, so that it can pass on to the next generation.
Yeah, I think. I had a job, so at some point, anybody that's got a job at some point, that job's going to come to an end.
Yeah.
My father was a farmer, and he was a farmer all of his life.
Yeah.
And I'd say he retired because he didn't milk the cows every day, or he didn't go to the farm every day.
Yeah.
But he probably went to the farm, he went to the farm less and less.
Yeah.
But he was still a farmer, so he could still enjoy it. He could still tootle with his vintage tractors and so on and so forth. So, that defines people. I think it's another whole podcast, isn't it? I'm sure you've done it before, really, around the whole area of kind of succession. But you kind of have to look after the new generation and the old generation, and you kind of have to respect the fact that they all have a sense of kind of dignity and
they've got to where they got to where they got by doing what they did.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, so it's good.
Okay, well, on that note, I think it's going to be a thank you very much to Neil for joining us. I hope I haven't spoilt the magic. Now you're this side of the microphone.
It's been fun.
And
thank you,
but otherwise, no, it's a goodbye from me.
And a goodbye from me.
And a goodbye from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to the Tune the Cud podcast, a podcast for the UK dairy industry brought to you from the southwest of England and listened to around the world. And now for the really boring bit, I'm afraid, the legal disclaimer. The information provided during this podcast has been prepared for general information purposes only and does not constitute advice. The information must not be relied upon for any purpose, and no representation or warranty is given to its accuracy, completeness, or otherwise. Any reference to other organisations, businesses or products during this podcast are not endorsements or recommendations of Chewing the Cud Limited. The views of Andrew Jones are personal and may not be the views of Chewing the Cud Limited, and the views of Sarah Bolt are personal and may not be the views of Kingshay Farming and Conservation Limited and any affiliated companies. For more information on the podcast and details of services offered by Chewing the Cud Limited, visit www.chewingthecud.com. Thank you and goodbye.